Hi guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Security Space podcast. Today our guest is Silvano, and what we will be discussing is all around securing the UK's CNI. Now, that will all become a little bit clearer in a couple of minutes, but Silvano, are you okay just to give the audience a little bit of an introduction to yourself, if that's okay?
Yes, thank you very much, Nick, to having me here today, and welcome to all the people listening to this one. So my name is Silvano Sogus. I have it's starting to get big as a number. So I have 25 years of experience in security. I started when security wasn't called cybersecurity. And I started in the engineering field, in telecommunications, actually. So I have a master's in electronics. Started my career when there was a particular moment in the telecommunication field in Italy when everything was becoming EP based. So moving from the PSTN, so the traditional wireline network, to voice over IP. And my career started in seeing how the two worlds could, interact with each other. And I've done quite a lot of work in the quality assurance field, but there was also security concerns because the protocols that were used originally, and they are still used actually, in the infamous protocol number 7, SS7, was generated to be an operational protocol, but was never designed to have a security in mind, because at the time there weren't particular security concerns. But exactly when the network started to be open to interconnection and interconnectivity with the internet, the issues start to pop up. And so I started to look into the security of SS7, in security of interoperability. I did kind of 5-6 years in that field with different hats. Again, from the quality assurance, from the engineering, from the project management perspective. So I had the opportunity to see the world from different points of view. Then something different happened, new, which was a growing attention to renewable energies. Talking about mid 2000, okay, 2005, 2006. The countries in Europe, also in UK, they started to consider that obviously the move from fossil fuels was a necessity, not anymore a nice thing to have, but really a necessity. And we are seeing this even now, even more, with the global warming accelerating. And so there were a lot of investments and attention in shifting from using natural, so let's say traditional fossil fuels to renewable energies. And in Italy, it was kind of a natural thing to do. We have a lot of sun, we have some wind, we have biomasses, so there was a lot of good initial sources to be used from the renewable perspective. And I started to be into that field, doing engineering for the renewable energy space, especially solar and a bit of wind and biomasses as well, but mostly photovoltaics plants. But obviously, I kept the security hat as well. So I was doing kind of freelancing on the security side, and what was happening at the time was starting to have focus on the privacy aspects of data security. So it wasn't yet GDPR at the time. It was each nation had their own flavor of data protection models, but there was a kind of a growing attention there. So I had these two type of businesses that were going in parallel, barely touching each other. There were still something starting to grow up from the operational technology perspective for renewable energies that I was particularly keen to investigate. So SCADA systems and so on that were pretty open without any type of security. But me coming from a security background, I was particularly interested. I've done something on that side as well. Done that for another 6 years, and this brings me roughly to 2012. And then I shut down that business multiple reasons, but the main reason was the business was, and to some extent is still, heavily subsidized. So it was depending on the investments done by the government. And depending on what was the sensibility of the government around those topics, you could see really a switch between the heavy investments and reduced investments and attention to other, let's say, sides of the energy mix. And this is a difficult thing for, let's say, creating a sustainable business model. Okay, because when you have a business plan that, especially for let's say, production grade plants that can last even a couple of years, because to get all the approvals, all the permissions and so on can be a pretty bureaucratic process, could be at the time. Now it's a bit simplified, but at the time it was really difficult. Having something that in the middle of that process changes completely your business model can be really difficult. So decided to close, and decided also to do something that I wanted to do, well, since I graduated, which was doing an experience abroad. And so I moved in UK, and this was right before Brexit, by the way. So landed in UK and started to do work purely on cybersecurity. I decided to kind of be a vertical on that side. Started my career in UK in a company that did and still does, has been absorbed by a US company now, and they do static analysis tools for embedded code. So what does it mean? When you're considering code that goes in things like cars, in things like, I don't know, energy systems, in things like planes and so on, that code, that especially the code that is governing some parts that can be impacting life of people, think about powertrains of the cars, think about engines in airplanes and so on, obviously needs to be ultra secure. So it needs to be ultra safe and ultra secure. It can't fail. You cannot have a blue screen of death, or I should say a black screen of death now, in the middle of something that is operating with life of people. In order to have that type of security, there are coding standards that have been mandated before that code can be essentially installed in the devices. Those coding standards kind of bring additional level of security to the code itself. And one of the most famous is called MISR. And this company does tools to verify that the code, so does code that verifies the code and verifies that the code is compliant with MISR. And I've been working in that company for 4 years. It's really interesting because of the type of exposure that type of process has across all functional safety areas. So we are touching critical national infrastructure. We are touching, as I said, automotive, avionics, healthcare, rails. So all type of industries that are pretty functional safety driven. And I was particularly interested in how we could inject this type of security right on the beginning of the full life cycle of code development. I had the opportunity to work with really clever people, had the opportunity to work with a lot of good companies in UK and in Europe and in Eastern Europe, especially, where they do a lot of development for, used to do a lot of the development for the car industries that are hosted in Germany and also to some extent in UK. So a really good experience. Then I moved to NCC Group for a couple of years. NCC Group is a well-known name in the cybersecurity space in UK and I would say globally. Again, a really good exposure to a lot of use cases, a lot of interesting cybersecurity problems, and again got a lot of contacts with really clever and knowledgeable people there. Then I done a couple of years in PA Consulting. Again, PA Consulting is a well-known name, especially in UK. They have a really good and great capability of digital trust and cybersecurity. And I was there to be a security architect in their capability. Done a lot of good work with them. And the last let's say engagement I had, it was 4 years in the data communication company DCC. Now DCC is one of those companies that if you ask people, nobody knows it. So if you ask people on the street, say, do you know a company that's called data communication company? They don't know. But actually, it's one of those companies that touches life of every residential household in UK. And the reason is the company that manages the infrastructure that connects all the smart meters to the relative energy suppliers, DNOs, and so on. So there was a decision a long time ago in UK to create a single entity that would have created a single infrastructure that would allow this type of interconnection. This was to avoid fragmentation, to avoid unnecessary inefficiency, etc. That company has been created, as I said, a bit more than 10 years ago, probably 15 years ago, and is managing at the moment around 35 million meters across UK. And I was there as director of security architecture and assurance and deputy CISO until end of last year. And currently I am a freelancer. I'm still invested in the critical national infrastructure cybersecurity field, and I also do training dedicated to this type of topics. So that's me.
Fantastic, Silvano. An absolutely fantastic introduction, and yeah, it obviously segues nicely as into kind of well, we've already covered off quite a bit of said topic all around your expertise in sort of critical national infrastructure, and I suppose I want to move it to when did you start to see? Because, like you say, you started off in security when security wasn't even a thing. And when did you start to see security become a real big part of critical national infrastructure? And what are some of the sort of challenge that you've sort of seen? Because, like you say, you said there at DCC, did you say that there was 35 million sort of customers?
Yes, at the moment, yes,
Yeah, so
35 million.
even that in itself, it's like that's such a large data set to be dealing with, and therefore, but you very rightly mentioned like who are they, and it's like it's like okay, that's such a worrying thing that there's so much going on in this vacuum that the security there will have to be sort of like top tier. So my question to you is, when did security start coming in as a serious player in the critical national infrastructure? And what have been some of the challenges that you've sort of seen during your time in the sort of last decade?
Yeah, so it's a good question because let's say to the people working in this field, it always been the case, right? So as I said, names change, paradigms to some extent change. There are some form of what is the last thing, what is the newest thing, but the processes and the concepts have always been there to some extent. The potential of disruption, probably the understood potential and perceived potential of disruption, probably has been maturing in the last 15 years, 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
There are multiple reasons for that, right? So one reason is a better maturing process from boards, from management, and so on to recognize this type of problem. There is the fundamental reason that is the IT digital transformations. Okay,
Yeah.
so all these organizations, even the most conservative one, they are undergoing or they already went through some form of moving to the cloud, some form of digitalizing their capability and their operational capabilities, some form of virtualization of their functioning
Mhm.
because of being able to offer better services to the customers, to the citizens, because being able to interconnect easily with other capabilities, sharing data in a more efficient way, and so on and so forth. And obviously, this thing is just accelerating. Think about artificial intelligence at the moment and the discussion on how this will leverage and will provide some form of even better and more personalized services to citizens. So that has been kind of one of the main drivers. in parallel, and for that reason, there has been a major focus from the regulatory perspective. So think about NIS, think about NIS 2 at the moment, so or the equivalent that is in UK, the equivalent bill that is the cybersecurity and resilience bill that has been created in UK. So there is a kind of a focus into understanding these are the things that are happening, and this is the things that we need to do in order to secure those things. And there are also known unknowns, which are mostly related with supply chain. So the other big driver, I would say, in recognizing the risk is globalization and the extended supply chains that all the suppliers of critical national infrastructure are subject to, and how to control that, and how to make sure that is in the right level of risk. So these are kind of there are a lot of directions that have created a better understanding, let's say, a better conscience of risk in the CNI,
Mm,
and how this has been let's say interiorized by governments and via the creation of the right level of regulatory requirements.
mm, mm. I wanted to kind of move it a little bit into the sense of the geopolitical sense of Arno, and most obviously at this moment in time we've got sort of tensions arising between Israel and Iran, and there's wars all over going on. But I suppose, like, a lot of conversations that I have, it's like, the next wars, they're not sort of purely going to be on the battlefield. A lot of them are going to be in the digital space. They already are in the digital space. And part of that will be attacking critical national infrastructure. It will be sort of, dare I say it, like, cutting off electricity to the hospitals or whatever it might be, or to other sort of national infrastructure providers. What is your view on the relationship between geopolitical tension and the UK's critical national infrastructure?
Yeah, it's a good one because to some extent, when you talk about this with defense people, they will recognize cyber as a kind of another dimension, right? There is ground, there is space, there is air, there is sea, and there is cyber. Um, but in cyber, that war has been always happening. So it's kind of a low intensity war, but has always been happening. It's just enough you go in any SOC that is protecting part of the critical national infrastructure and look at the attacks that they are receiving, or the tentative attacks that they are receiving, to realize that it's never totally quiet and nothing is happening. There is always something ongoing, right? There is a kind of a level, and then there are moments in history where that level ramps up quite a
Yeah.
lot. Uh, in cyber, that moment is already too late, right? Is the moment precedent is kind of that situation where the players are already into the system, and they're just quietly they're waiting for some form of trigger to act. This is the moment where you need to be sure that you are doing the right things, because waiting for the ramp up is already too late. So that is kind of the perception of I would say any cyber protection function. The whole concept of assume you are already breached, to me is resonating exactly that concept. Is saying there is no point in trying to think let's keep them outside. Let's think that they are already inside, and let's think how do we protect our system even if they are already inside. So all the ideas about zero trust network and so on and so forth, they are founded and they are grounded into that concept, which I think is a reasonable concept, even from the engineering perspective, not only from the security perspective, but even from the engineering perspective. So from this perspective, probably cyber is one of those domains where we are kind of used to that. So it's a normal status for us, and we try to do the best of that status.
Mm. And that's a really good viewpoint that you've had there from the engineering perspective. And I suppose what I want to kind of get the contrast view of is, like, what is the cultural approach towards security in the CNI sector? Because We know that we're still sort of in a transitionary phase. It's getting better, but slowly. But in the end user market, yet security is getting there. But it's all about how effectively you can communicate cyber risk to the boardroom. What is it actually like in your telecommunications sectors, in the government, in defence, in transport? What is it actually like in terms of their viewpoint towards security?
I think it's getting better. I think it's got better, especially as in the last 10 years or so. There is a better understanding of what is cyber. To some extent, many organizations, they were already mature to understand this type of things because they come from, as I said, from a culture of risk that is strictly related with protecting lives. Okay, and so if you think about functional safety standards, there is really not much that you need to do to translate those in cybersecurity standards. You change a couple of words, but the whole risk management process, the whole appreciation of risk, the whole assessment of probabilities, assessment of impacts, and so on is exactly the same. It's just changing the type of attacks. We talk about attacks instead of incidents. We talk about, malicious actors instead of accidental events, but kind of the concepts and the management of process, which are, by the way, the really difficult thing to do in an organization, they are already there. And boards, they tend to be composed by people that understand these things. I was mentioning before regulatory support. If you think about that, needs to, for example, brings responsibility to the board to approve the risk management process. Okay, which is a big thing. So if I remember, Article 20 that talks about that, and essentially it's saying the board cannot act anymore like let's say an entity that doesn't know anything about cybersecurity and just limits themselves to set the risk appetite. They need also to approve that the process used to manage risks inside the organization is fit for purpose, and they need to be trained. This is, I think, still Article 20 probably. They need to be trained in order to understand these type of things. So there is kind of a precise responsibility put on management of an organization that is really relevant, obviously, for CNI, but not only for CNI. That makes clear that cybersecurity is a problem of the whole organization. There is this type of misconcept that cybersecurity is a problem of the security function in an organization. The security function is an advisor. I used to be an advisor. Okay, I go to the business owner of some service, some application, whatever, and tell them, look, if you do this, these are the risks that you are going to face. Okay, these are the mitigation that we can put in place. This is your residual risk. Okay, are you happy with that or not? And the moment it doesn't fit with the overall risk appetite, the discussion must be what else we can do about that. Okay, but is not ultimately is not the decision of the security function per se. It's a decision that must be a business decision.
Mm.
Security is trying to allow the business to operate securely. It's not operating the business on its own. So this is kind of a concept that is really important and helps also the discussion with the board, making sure that the board knows their responsibility and then asks the cybersecurity function for their advisory role, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a fully sort of working machine, isn't it? The security. It's not just the guys in the hoods behind the keyboard.
Yeah, there
Right.
is that. The typical situation is, oh, we have the laptops, I don't know, locked without any USB access. Ah, this is security. Well,
Mm,
security did that because in order to protect the business mission, we need to be sure that you are not subject to ransomware.
mm,
If you are happy to be, risk exposed to ransomware, then we can remove that. But obviously, then when you put the things in these terms, then it's difficult to find someone that is going to argue with that.
mm. And I suppose to take your point one step further, to make it a little bit more existential, is do you think that the government can be doing more to support businesses? I.e., my thinking right now is the mindset of Israel towards cybersecurity, and obviously how everyone needs to sort of serve in the military, and they have like the Unit 8200, and the government actually supports a lot of cybersecurity startups there as well. And they kind of encourage a development pathway through there, and also for all these founders of these startups, they all share knowledge as well. And the culture towards cyber is a little bit different to the UK. It's a little bit more siloed. Cyber's still, you have questions like how do we get into the sector? Where so it's like you can see that the even just the culture towards security in general is a little bit different. So do you think that the government could be doing more sort of A, pathways into the industry, and B, just more development of the cybersecurity industry? What's your thoughts on that, Silvano?
Yeah, it's a difficult one. I'm not a politician, thank God, because it's a difficult. I'm saying that because it's a really difficult
Yes.
job. Obviously, I mean, Israel is a case on its own. Like you remember, that they have mandatory military duty, which we in Europe used to have when I was a youngster. So I was one of the last generation to have that type of mandatory duty. Um, and obviously, also a really small country, so it's easier to switch into the specific directions from the business perspective. It's also true that big countries like UK, like I come from Italy, like Italy and so on, they are facing a bit of a difficulty at the moment because they have a reconversion of their main industries. I
Mm.
think in Italy, for example, automotive used to be a big one, and at the moment, with the transformation of electrical vehicles, with the internationalization of the big producers and so on, there is a need to shift, and there is not yet a clear direction of shift to what. So obviously, cybersecurity offers opportunities in that space. Um, it needs to be something that is kind of a industry, let's say, industry strategy, okay, from the government perspective, and say, like you say, we invest this, offering that type of scenario for a couple of years for a youngster that doesn't have a clear direction in their profession. There must be some form of nucleus of creation of new industries, so an ease in terms of creation of startups that is there, but is not that strong like in Israel or in US at the moment. I think that UK has still a huge advantage, that is the financial market. So the financial market with no clear direction in investments. Well, now everybody has AI in their mouth, but it's kind of one of those situations that are easily mounting up to become a bubble. So there must be some form of additional direction that investors can take, and the market of investments is really still strong in UK. So probably there are opportunities there to make UK a more centered cyberspace. And I've seen a lot of good things done by government, by the National Cybersecurity Center. So there is quite a lot of things. Probably, yes, probably something even a bit more ambitious can happen in this country.
Mm, absolutely. And that pretty much brings me to my final question, Silvano, and you've sort of mentioned it throughout the podcast, and it is AI, and it's hard to do a podcast these days without mentioning it. But I'm going to do it in a different way, because yes, so we've had the AI phenomenon. AI's been around for a while, but I suppose it's kind of blown up in the mainstream in the last 2, 3 years. Definitely the last 12 months. And what I want to say is like, obviously we've got all these emerging threats now on the AI front, but what's around the corner is, quantum cryptography, quantum encryption, um, and take that back to its earliest form, or one of its earliest forms was sort of like, I might be going too deep here, but Alan Turing's encryption, sort of the Enigma machine in World War II is what sort of won that. So that's kind of relating it into critical national infrastructure and how it can affect it on the geopolitical sense. Quantum encryption, quantum cryptography is going to blow up in the next few years. We've got sort of the chips ready now as a result of the advancements of AI, and that in itself will put a lot of it changes the game in terms of the authentication space. So, do you think that our CNI is ready for this, or do you think this will just change the goalposts once more? And it's just going to be a series of events that are constantly changing now that we're in this age. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a difficult one, this one, right? So the quantum space is a known unknown. Okay, so you know that there is something that you need to do. Each organization will have or must do their own risk analysis and understand when are we moving from what we use now to something that is going to be secure against a cryptographically relevant quantum computer, which is essentially a quantum computer that is able to break the current cryptography. So there is an operational decision to be taken, risk-based, and there is a process. And ciphers that are quantum resistant are already there. So they've been standardized in the last couple of years by NIST. They have been approved. There are commercial versions of those. So it's just a matter of let's move. Which saying this is easy, doing that is completely different, because when you start digging into that, I've done that in the past. When you start digging into that and doing cryptography asset inventory, and you start understanding what happens if we move this and that this is where the devil is in the detail. But it is a transformation problem. Okay, we kind of know how to manage these things. It's a complexity problem that you need to throw money, you need to throw resources, but you can do that. AI is a bit of a different thing, is a different beast, because we have a version of AI that is currently the version that we use based on large language models, based on all the nice generative AI capabilities, for which we don't know what is the limit. Okay, so it can be that we have already reached the limit and it's just a matter of size, so we can do things a bit faster, a bit more efficiently, but that's about that. There is someone that says some emergent capabilities of these things will be started showing, and showing completely different abilities. I'm thinking about really thinking abilities.
Mm.
So, and this moves the post, right? Because if you're talking about just generation as it is now, we kind of, again, we are in the domain of knowing what we are talking about. Okay, there will be efficiencies. Probably people will start using this more and more, but they will be integrated in our current, let's say, models of doing stuff.
Mm.
Evolving and emerging capabilities means we may need to change to do stuff, and how and when and what is completely different. There is a totally then lateral, but really important to me, topic, that is how we as humans are going to govern that process.
Yeah.
There is obviously a problem of ownership. There is a problem of, let's say, prevalence, world level prevalence. There is also a problem of younger generations being able to access to knowledge base, culture, knowledge base jobs, knowledge base economy, and almost being blocked at this point by the usage of these tools by more senior people. So there is an element that, again, if I were a politician, I would look really, really closely, because there is a risk of having the next generation of professionals not being able to do a good or even a possible onboarding on the market.
Mm. Silvano, you've been the perfect guest to have on to discuss this
Thank you.
topic. And I just want to thank you again for coming
Thank
on
you.
to today's podcast. If anybody has any questions for what Silvano has raised today, or would like to reach out to him for his consultancy services, I'll be sure to put his information down below. But once again, Silvano, thank you very much for coming on the Security Space podcast.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.